Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to another review. I've been looking forward to reviewing this movie for quite some time. um, and that is, of course, the sequel to yesterday's film. A film that I've only heard of this movie in the last year and a half or so, and I've only recently purchased it in the last, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months. But excuse me, sorry. And that is, of course, Undisputed 2, Last Man Standing, released in 2006. Undisputed 2 was the first of the Undisputed series that I ever saw. Even though that I had seen fight scenes from 2 and 3 on YouTube, this was the first one that I purchased, and it was the first one that I saw from beginning to end. Well, admittedly, I wanted to get 3 first because 3 looked like the best one to me, and 3 was the one that I really, really wanted to see. I also wanted to see 2, and I went to my local FYE store at my mall, and the only one that they had there at the time was Undisputed 2, so I got it, and I watched the hell out of it. And let me tell you something. You know, the topic of sequels is often something that is either kind of brushed to the side or just isn't talked about very much in cinema. Because a lot of people say, well, sequels are pointless, sequels suck. Which I've always been a fan of the idea of sequels. Because, not to say that films can, like a lot of films when they first start out, they can be bad. In many cases, if a film has a franchise, a lot of times the first film is the best of the series. Some may say the original Star Wars is the best of the series. Some may say the first Jurassic Park is the best of the series. Some may like the first RoboCop. Some may like the first Terminator. Just a lot of people may like the first film best in a franchise. Rightfully so, because a lot of times, sometimes, the first film is the best. However, with the Undisputed series, and me myself, I am... I think that in some cases, there are franchises out there where the sequel... And some say the same thing about Clash of the Titans. I can see why. Shit, what was I going to say? There are some franchises out there where I think the sequels are better than the original. While I don't like this one more than the original, I do think it's better in many, many ways. And that is the Terminator franchise. I'm not just jumping on a bandwagon and agreeing with the general consensus that Terminator 2 is better than T1. Even though I like T1 a little more than T2, I do agree that T2 is, in many ways, leaps and bounds better than the first film. And is definitely in the top 5 list of greatest movie sequels ever made. Also, again, pardon my voice. And sorry for that little rant there, but with the Undisputed series, I wholeheartedly agree that Undisputed 2 is leaps and bounds better than the first Undisputed film. I'm not saying that to shit on the first film, don't get me wrong. I just think that even though this movie is direct to DVD and the first film was a theatrical release, even though this movie at times kind of shows that it's a direct to DVD film, I don't think that's a bad thing in the slightest, and even despite it being a direct-to-video film, I still wholeheartedly believe that Undisputed 2 is leaps and bounds better than the first Undisputed film. So let's get into the plot of Undisputed 2, shall we? Some years after his fight with Monroe from Undisputed 1, George Iceman Chambers, played by the fantastic Michael Jai White, finds himself broke without his boxer money,
not being the champion currently anymore and is in desperate need of money. So he takes a job as like some kind of vodka sponsor in Russia, and he's obviously not happy about it. um, However, he is framed for possession of cocaine shortly after him trying to film a commercial for this vodka place, and sent to one of the harshest penitentiaries in Russia. Apparently, Russia has really, really strict cocaine or drug laws in general, which makes sense. So he's framed and sent to this prison where it's just a fucking mess. At this prison, there also exists illegal underground MMA tournament fights. Currently being held, the title of champion is oh man, I can't. The current champion of this prison is a man named Yuri Boyka, played by the fantastically talented Scott Adkins. I still find it a little strange that the dude's English, yet his most famous role, he's playing a Russian dude. He pulls off the Russian accent very, very well. And one of the first scenes of the film is Boyka's first fight, or not first fight that he ever has, but one of the first scenes that we see is the first Boyka fight that the audience sees, and we're exposed to what type of fighter Boyka is. He's a mixed martial artist, not literally, but he's on steroids. He takes full advantage of the system's lax rules. The only rules that are present in these matches are standard MMA rules. No biting, no eye gouging, no hair pulling. This one's not sad, but there's also no crotch shots. And Boyka his first opponent in the film, he just utterly slaughters. His opponent gets a couple hits in, but it's very clear that Boyka just completely outclasses him in this fight. And like I said in the previous film, though I'll say this once again, Scott Adkins is trained in kickboxing, karate, capoeira, judo, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, ninjutsu, wushu, boxing, and Jeet Kune Do. Very, very, very good skill set under his belt. And it's clear that Boyka, just as a fighter, he's a kickboxer with elements of jiu-jitsu and judo. And a little bit of karate. So he's a very well-rounded fighter, balancing himself between powerful punches and kicks, as well as joint locks, submissions, and throws, and submission holds. I think I said that already. Boyka just utterly tears apart his first opponent in the film. Chambers is very defiant towards the prison guards at this Russian prison. One of his first scenes there is that he's forced to take a shower in butt-ass cold temperatures. This movie takes place, I'm guessing, in winter, and Russia is infamous for its extremely fucking cold winters. So there's no heating for the showers, so he has to take it cold. And at first, he says, go fuck yourself, heat this shit up. However, the guards try to swarm him and beat the shit out of him, and of course, him being a former heavyweight champion, he just utterly beats the shit out of them, using strong one, sometimes two-punch tactics to take him down, and even some powerful basic kicks to take him out too. However, the main guard, he decides to pull a bitch move and just call in for like 20 or 25 guards and force him to take a butt-ass cold shower. He's taken to his cell, and he meets his cellmate, Stephen Parker, who he just calls Stevie, a British drug addict, who is kind of taken aback and, what's the word? Ecstatic to be in the presence of a former heavyweight champion. And they kind of start to form a kind of a friendship throughout the film. During his first meal at the prison, Chambers encounters Boyka for the first time. And it's very obvious that Boyka really, really wants to take on Chambers. He's trying to every time they're around, they just keep trying to egg each other on to start a fight. And Boyka wants to get him in the ring. Whereas Chambers, he wants nothing to do with the prison. He knows that he keeps saying, "Look, I'm going to get out soon. It's pointless. I don't want to fight. You can keep this shit." But Boyka keeps egging him on and wants to fight in the ring. They do end up getting into a bit of a brawl in the mess hall. But, however, it's broken up and the two are separated. Stevie is getting his ass handed to him by Boyka's gang because they hired him to try to convince him to fight Boyka. And Chambers comes to his rescue, takes out the thugs, and just says, "Look, I didn't save you because I'm sympathetic towards you. I just don't like seeing people get bullied." Because he notices his needle marks on his wrists, and, "Hey, you're a junkie. I didn't save you just because I felt bad. I just don't like seeing people be bullied." So during Boyka's second fight, where he fights a clear professional kickboxer, the guy actually is a professional kickboxer in real life. Boyka still slaughters him. Chambers witnesses the way Boyka fights, and he just sees it as just being a barbaric act of violence and wants nothing to do with it. He is defiant towards the guards once again when they take him to the prison's sewer system, where apparently that every single day, it's basically like a giant septic tank. And this giant septic tank gets clogged with shit every single day. So Chambers is forced to shovel it down a drain or some shit and unclog the septic tank, which I can't even imagine how much it's got to stink. And this is the first time he encounters a man named Nikolai, aka known as his nickname is Krot, which is Russian for mole. A wheelchair-bound ex-Russian commando. He doesn't know that at first, but he kind of forms a bit of a bond with Chambers as well, but that happens a little later in the film. After Chambers is accosted by Boyka's gang once again to try to rough him up and convince him, "Hey, fight Boyka," Krot kind of comes to his aid, kills one of the gang members by snapping his neck, and driving away the rest of the thugs by breaking a steam pipe. The two kind of form a bit of a respect for each other. After being defiant towards the guards once again, he is thrown in what they call the hole, which is basically primitive solitary confinement. He grows sick, and he is given some soup, pills, and bread by Nikolai, and he asks him, "Why are you helping me? Because where I'm from ain't nothing free." Nikolai just says, "I'm helping you because I want to." So once he gets out of the hole, Chambers finally decides, "Yeah, fuck it. I'll fight Boyka." So he takes on Stevie as his corner man and also his sparring partner. He puts on those boxing mitts and helps him train and such. During the first fight between Boyka and Chambers, the first round, Boyka decides, and I quote him, "I'll beat you at your own game. Fists only. Just don't bleed on me too much," says Chambers. And the first fight is kind of a repeat of the first fight between Chambers and Monroe, where Chambers just utterly demolishes Boyka in terms of just being pure punching match. Boyka, he's a competent puncher, but Chambers is a fucking boxing champion. That you just can't. You can't stack 40% against 100%. So Boyka is just utterly devastated within the first round. However, the second round, actually no, it's still the first round. The second half of the first round, Boyka decides fuck this and starts using his legs to kick the living shit out of Chambers. And despite that, Chambers still kind of holds his own by slipping in powerful strikes here and there. But it's very clear that once Boyka resorts to using his legs, Chambers is outclassed. Before the fight occurred, Boyka's gang behind his back went to Stevie and forced him to spike Chambers' bottle of water with a light sedative. And when he goes to his corner after the first... When he goes to Boyka's corner after the first round, or first half of the... first round, he dries himself off and takes a swig of that water, and the sedative quickly takes effect, and Chambers is defeated in the second round. Thinking that Stevie intentionally drugged him, when he wakes up, he goes to his cell and finds Stevie has hanged himself, unfortunately, due to just sheer amount of guilt. Obviously, Chambers is pissed off at Boyka and says, "You rigged that fight," and and punches the warden and is taken out in the middle of the snowy, butt-ass cold weather. Sorry. Wearing only a pair of pants, 2 boots, and a shirt to be exposed to the elements as part of punishment. Boyka had no idea that his gang was going to spike Chambers and ends up killing the 2 punk asses who were like the second in command of his gang. Sorry, my foot itches. And they were the ones who initiated the drugging of Chambers. Chambers spends, I think it's like 3 or 4 days, almost crucified, hanging on this pole in the middle of the butt-ass cold. However, some of the prisoners come out and they clothe him in warmer stuff. Like, one gives him a blanket, one gives him a hat, and a pair of gloves. And the same guy who gave him the blanket gives him some water. Another guy gives him some bread to eat. However, one of the prison guards notices him being clothed and warmer, and the warden decides to force all of the inmates who assisted Chambers to freeze seemingly either freeze their asses off or freeze to death out in the cold. I forgot to mention this guy, the mob boss who runs these illegal fights and is kind of like the unofficial head guy at this prison, and has the warden in his pocket, named Gaga. No, not Lady Gaga. It's a dude. Gaga comes to the prison and says, you weren't allowed to, or you weren't supposed to be put out in the cold like that. I'm sorry about that. And Chambers says, look, you said if I fought Boyka, you'd let me go. And Gaga says, no, the deal was you were to defeat Boyka. Sorry, my phone went off. You were to defeat Boyka, not just fight him, defeat him. See, the little dilemma that Gaga was facing was Boyka was just becoming too good at being a fighter, so it was pretty much just being one-sided, and it just would eventually go on long enough as to where he couldn't bet on Boyka anymore because nobody would bet in these fights. So he wanted to bring in some competition, which obviously Chambers just kind of wasn't happy about. Sorry. Hang on. Somebody messaged me. Anyway, so Chambers decides to rematch Boyka. No drugs, no interference, nothing. Just him and... Sorry, goddamn, my leg itches. No interference, just him and Boyka. Imagine being in that position that he's in. I wouldn't be happy about being in that position, that's for damn sure. So... he takes Krot under his, or not Krot, Nikolai under his wing as his trainer, and Krot teaches him more about, and to quote him, grappling, military close combat, things you might need in this type of fight, and teaches him standard judo flips, judo throws, and jujitsu locks and jujitsu submission techniques, and also some basic kicking techniques. Nikolai essentially morphs Chambers from a boxer to more of a standard UFC fighter. And of course, the final fight goes a lot better than the first fight. Not to say the first one's bad, but it's a lot more exciting. And it's clear that the two fighters are evenly matched. You have Boyka being the MMA fighter, and who's just going all holds barred, kicking, punching, tossing, flipping, doing submission holds, and Chambers, while still operating more as a puncher, he's been morphed into more of a UFC fighter. UFC fighters are different from MMA fighters, whereas MMA fighters, you're allowed to punch, kick, and throw, because like I said, anything goes in MMA, just no biting, no eye gouging, no hair pulling, no crotch shots. UFC fighters, they have a lot more rules. You can punch, and you can grapple, and you can employ knee strikes, but you can't kick. And I think you can employ some elbow shots too, but you cannot kick for some reason. The rules are much more tight in UFC, which is kind of how Chambers is operating as a fighter in the final scene. And the fight ends with Chambers defeating Boyka by getting his leg in a joint lock on his head and pressing down on Boyka's knee until it breaks, fucking up Boyka's knee really bad. And the film ends with Chambers using his fight winnings to free Nikolai from prison and reunite him with his estranged niece in a happy reunion at the end of the film. So how about this plot for Undisputed 2? It is so much better than the first film. When I watched Undisputed and Undisputed 2, I honestly can't believe the first movie is part of this series, because the two films are so different. Like I said at the beginning, this movie is leaps and bounds better than the first Undisputed film. Not taking anything away from the first Undisputed movie. God damn, my leg itches. It's entertaining for what it is, but ultimately, if you compare it to this movie, the first one really does fall short. So what are the pros to Undisputed 2? The acting is great. Whereas it was just good in the first movie, here it's really great. Everybody gives a really solid performance. The Russian actors, some of them just didn't speak a word of English. They just learned their lines for this movie in English only. But even then, you kind of can't tell. I found that out because I listened to the admittedly kind of poor audio commentary for this film with director Isaac Florentine, Michael Jai White, and Scott Adkins. And I learned that some of the cast members who are actually Russian didn't know a word of English and just learned their English lines for this film only. But they still do a good job. Michael Jai White is spectacular as Chambers. Chambers still has his street prison slang motor mouth. Like every other word that he says is fuck or bitch or shit. Though his most common swear word is fuck. He talks like a boxer. That's for damn sure. Scott Adkins as Boyka is fucking phenomenal. This isn't my favorite film with Boyka in it. That's admittedly the next film. And also my second favorite is admittedly 4, but that's not taking away from Scott Adkins' performance in this movie whatsoever. He is amazing as Boyka. He has a sense of menace to him. He has more of a personality. He's just overall a better villain. I say that kind of loosely. I actually think he's more of an anti-villain in this movie. But he's certainly a better antagonist than Monroe ever would be. He's certainly a better fighter, too. If you take Monroe and put him against Boyka, Boyka would just slaughter him utterly. No offense to Wesley Snipes, but sorry, man. And overall, the acting and the characters, they're all fantastic. So that's kind of two pros rolled into one. Oh, and also the guy who plays Nikolai does a fantastic job. He portrays a man who has a bit of a shady past. He admits that, yeah, I've killed people before. I'm ashamed of it, but I'm also not ashamed of it. I did some bad things, and I've accepted my reality, as he says earlier, as he says in the film. And he's kind of down to earth, but he's also he's definitely a bit of a wise ass, and he knows how to. He's a wise ass and a smart ass. Sorry, I had to suppress a burp. The guy who plays Nikolai does a fantastic job, and the acting is great, and the characters are great. That's two pros. The pacing to the film overall, pro number 3, the pacing is very, very solid. I'd say it's better than the first film, definitely. The movie flows at a very cinematic pace. There are moments that are kind of slow when they need to be slow, like they're establishing the environment that Chambers is in now. They're establishing the prison, establishing the way the guards act, establishing the way the prisoners act, and just establishing overall the environment that Chambers is in. And there's also scenes that are very fast-paced, like the training montages and especially the fight scenes that are fast and exciting, get your blood going, that get your heart pounding, effectively so. Pacing is really good. The story, pro number 4, the story overall is very, very, just a big improvement over the previous film. Whereas the first movie, it felt like there was so much missed potential and missed opportunities that it kind of hurt the movie overall. Here, that potential is so much greatly expanded upon. We see exactly how much the mafia influences these underground fights. It shows us how much what the guards think of these prison fights, what the prisoners think of these prison fights, the environment and type of people that are around these prison fights. It's the story is, and the lore is so wonderfully expanded upon. It is so fantastic to watch. The fight choreography in this movie is very, very, very good. It's very smooth, because this movie had a budget of only $3 million, which, granted, I think for direct-to-DVD movies, that's actually not bad. But this movie looks very professional, and the fight choreography definitely shows, because you have two fantastically talented martial artists, being Scott Adkins and Michael Jai White. Haven't really talked much about Michael Jai White. Michael Jai White is definitely another one of my favorite martial artists. I definitely place him at, admittedly, number 5, because I like number 5 or number 4. Because I like Tony Jaa, Scott Adkins, and Donnie Yen a little more than him. But Michael Jai White is still an utterly fantastic martial artist. He's trained in Shotokan Karate. I have not seen the Ricky O movie. I'd actually like to. Shotokan Karate, Kyokushin Karate, which is primary style, Goju Ryu Karate, Taekwondo, Okinawan Kobudo, which is a weapon martial art, Jiu-Jitsu, Wushu, and boxing. Oh, and kickboxing, too. And oh my god, he's such a spectacularly talented martial artist. Michael Jai White even though he operates primarily as a boxer in this movie, he still does incorporate some of his other martial arts talents, like his powerful standard kicks and he does a couple like standard arm flips and judo throws and stuff like that. And he's even operating as like a basic UFC fighter. Jai's portrayal of hand-to-hand combat in this movie is very, very solid. Scott Adkins, like I said, he portrays mainly as a kickboxer with skills in judo and jiu-jitsu. And Scott Adkins, in my opinion, he just brings his complete A game into this performance, and brings it even better in the next two films. Scott Adkins is utterly fantastic as a fighter, and the fight choreography, like I said, it's very smooth. It's very it's tightly edited, but it also is kind of loosely edited. And I say that because there's kind of like the first movie. There's a lot of there's a lot of longer shots to showcase the two fighters just going at each other. Though there's definitely a lot more of the shorter cuts and the tight, quick editing. However, it's not sloppy like it kind of is in the newest Resident Evil film. Though even there, I kind of thought it was alright. The tight editing is done very, very professionally. It's done very, very well. And overall, the choreography is very, very, very good. And the last pro, which is the best thing about this movie, obviously, are the fight scenes. The fight scenes, there's a lot of them. There's 4 like main fights, but there's also like 4 or 5 little skirmishes between Chambers and the prison guards and some of the prisoners throughout the film. So I think the movie has a total of like 10 or maybe even 11 or 12 fight scenes throughout the film. So if you're looking for a movie that has a lot of action, this movie's got you covered, because there's a lot of fight scenes in this film. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how much action was in this film. Definitely, hands down, my favorite fight is the final fight between Chambers and Boyka, because this was when the two were operating completely at the best of their abilities. They were just determined to tear each other to pieces, and it's so spectacular to watch. My second favorite fight is probably Boyka's first fight in the film, when he's taking on his first opponent that we see. It's just a great representation of how competent Boyka is as a fighter, and just how, almost without even breaking a sweat, because obviously he does, but he just so almost effortlessly takes this dude down without even second thoughts. And it's so spectacular to watch. So with all these pros that I say about Undisputed 2, are there any cons? And to be perfectly honest, no, there isn't. I can't even think of any nitpicks to give this movie. This movie's pretty fucking perfect. If you want a really good, really entertaining, really well made, really well thought out, well acted martial arts movie, oh my god, Undisputed 2 is such a fantastic martial arts movie. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it to the utmost degree, which is why I'm going to give Undisputed 2 a perfect 10 out of 10. If you like action movies, give this movie a watch. If you like prison drama films, give this movie a watch. If you like martial arts movies, give this movie a watch. So that'll do it for this review of Undisputed 2. Look forward to tomorrow as I review my favorite of the series, and is one that I can't believe it took me so long to get around to seeing. And that is Undisputed 3 Redemption. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with your friends, and as always, I will see you in the next one, and I'll see y'all in the ring to whoop your asses.